There really couldn't be a better time for this album. You couldn't have predicted that this is where we would be at this very moment, and yet it feels like this album could have come out of this very moment.
Yeah.
Can you talk about where you were headspace wise when you decided to write this music and how relevant it is to what we're going through right now?
Yeah. For me, while there are a few songs on this album, like Gratitude, which is the last song of the album, I mean, I started penning that in 2010. So I've been sitting on that and figuring out a way to get that out. But in 2016, after the election that year, my, uh, my heart exploded and I started writing different kinds of songs. And I knew that 2020 was going to be another engaged election year. So I thought, so this was last year. I just started putting all this together. I teamed up with Michael Goldwasser of Easy Star All Stars, who's a phenomenal reggae producer and great musician. And we put a phenomenal band together. And we thought the sound of reggae and all the different genres inside of it are so danceable and so beloved around the world. Um, let's make a full album of great reggae tracks. And at the same time, let's try to breathe life into some issues we care about through these songs and these lyrics, and offer it to the world in 2020, because we know it's going to be heated. We know there's going to be debate. We know there needs to be radical change and recognition for many. We of course did not predict this level of radical change, but I'm I'm glad to see an uprising. I really am. I'm not an anarchist, but I am glad to see America getting its education, and an invitation for new ways to mobilize, strategize, react, use our resources, use our powers. So, look, it was intended to be that. You know, it's intended to be this little album of um, the songs that are easy to dance or march to remember to stay positive while you're out there, um, using your voice or your time for the greater good.
With everything feeling so heavy right now and everything feeling so bad, where do you go to look for the good? Where are you going currently to look for the good?
Um, well, if I'm not on the internet, I'm at my piano usually, and that's kind of a new instrument for me.
Okay.
But it has a different voice, it has a different weight. Um, I feel like I can play just more sounds, different sounds. I don't play as quickly on piano as I do on guitar, but it's still, I like where I'm going with that. So that's been my piece. That's been my little church that I've been going to and honoring.
Yeah.
And it's right here. That's why I'm pointing to
Yeah,
over
yeah,
here.
yeah, 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 I see.
It's right there.
Right there, you got the keyboard and yep.
Yeah. And then, on the internet, it's, I go for peace. I follow Sean King and um, NAACP, and I just want to educate myself more on how I can better use my time and resources, how I can better use my internet resources to because I feel like the protest, the battlefield for a more equal and just America is not just on the streets, it's also on the internet, because we've clearly seen propaganda come our way to heighten our president and those initiatives, but we also need the propaganda or the internet content and bravery and songs and sharing, and to heighten the injustices and to heighten and advance equality. Um, Here's something interesting. About 10 years ago, I took a trip to Ghana, and I was headed to London right after that. And while in Ghana, I got to visit the door of no return, which is what they would call the door that slaves were passed through. If they went through that door, they were going to be boarded onto a slave ship and exported out of Africa to either London or the United States. And it was a intense tense location, intense place, and there's lots of museums of like this in Ghana, these forts where slaves were captured and held and detained and shipped out. And then I went to London, and I went to the very square where a group of people started the abolitionist movement 100 years before the U.S. even considered it. This is about 100 years before the Civil War, and it's likely why the Revolutionary War even happened. But the thing that helped abolish slavery was the printing press. This blew my mind. There's a printing press because suddenly now we've got newspapers and we can better get the news out. We can make more people aware of what's going on. And a newspaper printed what a slave ship looks like, what humans look like stacked in a boat, and how harsh the conditions are. And it started to touch people's hearts. And eventually people said, enough is enough. Why are we doing this to other human beings? And so we're experiencing the same thing right now with the level of communication that we have. There's many cameras and eyeballs and engaged people as we have. We have all these micro printing presses all over the planet exposing the harsh realities of the brutalities that people of color and LGBT community as well has experienced this type of hatred and bigotry. So I feel like this is a huge awakening. There's a huge new printing press being printed and revealed to all of us.
I've never met you in person. We've had some phone interviews in the past, and I've sort of seen you come fully into yourself. And
There.
well, no, but like even the sexual, the journey of you being an out public figure, that took some time. I was looking back at some of our conversations, and there were hints. You dropped me a couple of hints along the way. I think it was 2010 maybe when you told me that you didn't like feeling another man's facial hair on your skin, and then a few years after that, it was you had considered you'd been asked to join in on a threesome with another couple, but it wasn't a reality at that point. Maybe that was 2012, 2013, and then we got in 2018 the news that you were bisexual. Um, can you talk a bit about what that journey has been like over that span of time and why at that moment it seemed like the right moment to say I am bisexual?
Yeah. Um, I've I felt for so long I wanted to be careful to my family, which is probably a struggle a lot of people have. Um, and when I say that, it's not because they wouldn't love me for who I am. It's that I was afraid to say who I was when I was younger, or I was afraid to explore it because I thought exploring it was the wrong thing to do because of things I heard when I was growing up and because of how I saw society react to um, LGBT, the LGBT community. So I thought if I go down this lane, I was taught that it was not a good path. And so for me to come out and say I was taught that that's not a good path is potentially causing harm to my mother, who raised me well. So I never wanted to put her in a position that made her feel or look like a bad parent. Same to my stepfather or my stepmother or my father. I had 4 parents. So they're not all to blame, and I'm not going to throw any of them under the bus because I also had parents of friends that I hung out with. And when we hang out at friends' houses, those parents are my parents as well. So it was just growing up in a kind of community where I didn't feel safe to go down that path and explore um, some intuitions that I had. And so I closeted it, I suppressed it, I put it aside. And as I go through life and I start having experiences, I it's in my programming. It's in this it's the systemic issues of going through life thinking this is not healthy or something. But the more I went through life and the more I became supported and were uh, supportive of LGBT, I realized I was safe. I was home, and enough is enough. Silence doesn't do anybody any good, and it wasn't doing me any good. It wasn't giving me the opportunity to have the more of the experiences I wanted to have in my life. And as I was getting older, I thought, Jesus, am I going to waste my whole life on fear? Or can I step into this and be proud of who I am and see where this takes me, see where this journey takes me, see what kind of new friendships I form, see the level of love that I'm capable of that I've not given myself permission for. So that was my journey, was really, how can I do this in a way that I'm ready and that I can also be just still mindful of my parents. You know, honestly, I thought I'm going to have to wait until my parents leave the planet before I get to be who I am. And I didn't want that. I wanted them to see who I am while they're still alive. And I want to be who I am while I'm still alive. Um, you know, and it gave me even more empathy and more compassion for those who were taking that journey every day, and for the out community who just lives bravely in this world every day. Um, so it was time for me to come out. If I was really going to use my superpower for good, it was time for me to start addressing who I am, because authenticity is the new reality.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful story. Um, I It takes me to gratitude, the last song on the album, which to me, now that you've explained that story and your journey, it seems almost like a letting go. I don't think I've ever thought to give gratitude to the people who called me a faggot when I was a kid,
Mm,
and I think that that takes a lot of work. And clearly,
mm.
you have put in the work. Can you talk about how that song came about and how you were able to get to a place where you could show gratitude to the people who ridiculed and put you down as a kid?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, I can't fight violence with violence, and I can't just call names back to the people who've called me names. It's not going to create any peaceful resolve. At some point in any conflict, someone has to take responsibility. That's just, there's, whether you're the winner or loser, somebody has to just come forward and take a knee at some point, right? And so rather than name calling, I tried to look for the good in the situations that I experienced in high school. I thought, but you know what? All of that name calling in high school and being slammed up against the locker, and the time that I was actually very physically, very physically beat up, um, that those things were the times where I would leave those situations. I'd feel strong because the adrenaline's in my body, but my mind would also say, I cannot wait to get out of this town. And while fleeing is not always the answer, and it's not always the option for people, um, it put fuel into my talent. I knew that I could sing. I knew that I had something to offer. I wanted to go to New York and start a new life. And in my senior year, when this turmoil was happening, it gave me so much extra, like, drive. It's like, I'm going to go do something better with my life than to be here and be bullied by you. And it shaped my life because it made me want to be a better person, better than that person. You know, I didn't want to go back and attack that person. I just wanted to demonstrate that I was better than that person, and that all the energy they put tearing me down was a waste of their energy, because all I've done is build myself up to be a bigger, better, stronger, more active person. Um, so knowing that, I've known that for a long time, I did want to put that in song. So I started this song back in 2010 even, and I played it live a few times, but it never really found its home on an album, and it never really, and if it's not on an album, it's hard to have it sustain on a stage because audiences don't really have it themselves to own. Um, so finally on this album, working with this phenomenal reggae band, and having 10 years to really build the song. And I listen to also a lot of gospel music, especially on Sundays. Um, I was able to weave some of my gospel influences into the song Gratitude, and do my best to try to look for the good. That's what this album project was. How can I look for the good in this? How can I look for the good in 2020? How can I look for the good in my past? And I knew that I needed to figure out how can I look for the good in the trauma of my high school bullies. And if I can, it's that drive. It's that they gave me that drive. And I hope that they're embarrassed or sorry or feel like total failures because their bullying did nothing but help me change the world.
Pride is different this year. We're going virtual. A lot has changed.
Just because it's going virtual does not mean Pride is still not a protest. You know, Pride, because the battlefield is not just on the streets, it's on the internet. And it's amplified when our voices come together. And, you know, every time I take a Zoom call with somebody, I learn something. So every time I've tuned into a virtual event, I've learned something. And that's what virtual Pride will be. More people might go to the virtual Pride parade than have ever been because uh, I've never been to a parade. I personally just don't like going out to parades, but I've also never been in town. I've been touring when San Diego Pride happens, so I've missed it. Um, Virtual Pride will finally give a lot of people around the world an opportunity to check it out and to learn. So my message to people this year is keep going and go harder than ever. I honestly feel like what's going on in the world is getting us closer to the Equal Rights Amendment. And that's been a long time coming. I mean, that is a long time coming. The last time the was amended and ratified was in the 90s, and it had to do with Congress salaries. Who gives a fuck about that? So I think what's really heating up is going to get us closer to that Equal Rights Amendment, which is going to be policy that protects. So my message to Pride is go harder than ever. Even though we may not be on the streets, um, go harder than ever. And who knows, this thing might spill over into the streets anyway, because the internet can't hold us. It can't. Like, this is too big for a computer screen, you know? There's too much going on right now. So
Well, we might be at the same virtual Pride. Who knows? This might be your first Pride season.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
through the computer screen.
I've got friends and neighbors that invite me every year. They're like, come on, we're going to go to San Diego. We get a hotel room. You got to be a part of it. You got to be a part of it. But my schedule never allowed because I always signed up and went out on tour and did other things. So
Yeah.
here I'm probably going to hole up with my friends and neighbors and actually do the virtual Pride event and go hard.
Well, happy Pride, Jason.
Thanks.